I've always trusted Claire implicitly. After all, trust is the foundation of any strong marriage, right? We've been together for over a decade, built a life around shared dreams, and raised two beautiful kids. Our home, a cozy suburban haven with a swimming pool, is usually a place of calm amidst the chaos of life. But lately, I've been feeling off. It all started a few weeks ago, during a morning that should have been like any other. As I wrangled our two kids into their school uniforms, Claire called. It was unusual, her calling that early, especially since we'd just spoken the night before. Her voice, always calm and warm, had a nervous edge. "Matt, I need you to cancel our credit cards," she said, rattling off an elaborate story about her purse being stolen at a hotel during a work seminar. "I already told my boss, and she's arranging for replacements, but I need you to handle our personal cards right away." I didn't question her. Why would I? She was always careful, maybe too much so, and it seemed like an honest mistake. I cancelled the cards, offered some comforting words, and moved on with my day. But something about the call lingered. Maybe it was the way she brushed off my concern, or the fact that she mentioned needing $1,200 cash, uncharacteristic for Claire, who usually relied on her corporate card for everything work-related. A few days later, while sorting through some paperwork, I stumbled across the statement for Claire's personal investment account. I'd always respected her privacy when it came to the inheritance she received after her parents passed. But curiosity got the better of me when I noticed a $3,000 withdrawal around the time of her stolen purse incident. I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. She hadn't mentioned any big purchases or investments recently. So, I did something I'm not proud of, I dug deeper. It turns out, the money had gone to a local jewelry store. Odd, right? She hadn't bought me anything, and while Claire has a brother, he's not exactly the diamond ring type. That was the first crack in the picture-perfect frame of our life together. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was planning a surprise. Maybe the stolen purse had her flustered, and she made an impulsive decision. But as the days went on, the questions piled up. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. As Claire packed for yet another work trip, this time a 2-day seminar out of state, I noticed her carefully folding the lace lingerie I'd given her for our anniversary into her suitcase. The same lingerie she hadn't even worn for me. "You're going all out for this seminar," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She flashed me a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just want to make a good impression," she said, spritzing herself with perfume she only wears on special occasions. That's when the seed of doubt fully took root. I couldn't shake the thought, was there something, or someone, she was keeping from me? The house felt different after Claire left. Quieter, sure, but it wasn't just the absence of her usual chatter or the sound of her heels clicking across the hardwood floors. It was the absence of something deeper, something intangible I hadn't been able to name until now, trust. I spent the better part of the afternoon trying to shake off the unease. Claire had always been meticulous, almost obsessive, when it came to her work. Maybe that's all this was, a burst of professionalism, wanting to impress her peers. But the thought of that jewelry store withdrawal and her out-of-character packing lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. And then, the text came. I was mid-sentence grading physics exams at the dining room table when my phone buzzed. The number was unrecognized, and the message was short, cryptic even. "Your wife isn't who you think she is. Check the guest list for the Palmer Hotel." My stomach dropped. It felt like someone had punched me right in the gut. My first instinct was to delete it, pretend I hadn't seen it. This had to be a scam, right? Or a prank. Someone messing with me. But as much as I tried to convince myself of that, I couldn't shake the chill crawling up my spine. I set my pen down, heart pounding as I stared at the screen. My palms were damp, and my mind raced through possibilities. Could this be connected to Claire's trip? "No, stop it, Matt," I muttered under my breath. You're being ridiculous. But the nagging feeling wouldn't let go. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the website for the Palmer Hotel. I didn't even know if this was where her seminar was being held, but it seemed like the logical place to start. A few clicks later, I found their conference directory page and typed in the search, Chicago Educators Summit, attendee Claire Wilson. The spinning wheel on the screen felt like an eternity. Finally, the result popped up, no attendees found matching your search. I blinked, rereading it 3-4 times. Maybe I'd spelled her name wrong. I tried again, carefully typing out her first and last name. The same result. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. No, I whispered. This doesn't mean anything. She probably just registered under her maiden name. Except Claire hadn't used her maiden name in over a decade. Every email, every conference badge, every work interaction, she was Claire Wilson. So why wasn't she listed? I leaned back in my chair, staring blankly at the computer screen. My head felt like it was spinning. I wanted to call her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What would I even say? Hey, honey, got a weird text saying you're a liar, so just checking if you're actually at a seminar. No, that wasn't going to work. The next step was one I knew I'd regret, but I couldn't stop myself. I pulled up her calendar on our shared account, the one we used to keep track of kids' activities and work trips. Sure enough, the conference was marked. But when I clicked on the event, a smaller note hidden beneath it caught my attention, A&M Special Project. A&M. My mind raced, trying to piece together the connection. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks, Adam Reeves. The new PE teacher Claire had mentioned casually over dinner a few weeks ago. He'd been helping her organize some fitness initiative at her office, she'd said. But suddenly, I remembered how often his name had come up lately. Too often. My chest tightened. Was I being paranoid, or was there something going on between them? I spent the rest of the night oscillating between denial and anger. This was all circumstantial, right? Maybe I'd jumped to conclusions. But my gut told me otherwise. By midnight, I had a plan. Tomorrow, I'd dig deeper. I didn't know what I was going to find, but I knew I wouldn't rest until I had answers. The next morning, I woke up early, the heavy weight of unease pressing on my chest. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just overreacting, but the nagging voice in my head refused to be silenced. Claire had always been my partner, my confidant, the person I trusted most in the world. Yet here I was, second-guessing everything. After the kids were off to school, I made a pot of coffee and sat down with my laptop. It was time to start digging. I knew I'd feel guilty later. Violating her privacy wasn't something I ever imagined myself doing, but I needed answers. I couldn't keep walking around with this pit in my stomach. I started with her emails. Claire and I shared a home network, and while I'd never had a reason to snoop before, I'd set up the accounts myself years ago. Her password hadn't changed, our anniversary date, and within seconds, I was in. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Messages from colleagues, clients, and the occasional friend. But then I noticed a folder buried at the bottom of the list, labeled personal. It wasn't unusual for her to have a folder for non-work emails, but something about it felt off. Inside, I found a series of messages that stopped me cold. Subject: Weekend Plans. From adam.reeves@schooldistrict.com. To claire.wilson@marketingfirm.com. Looking forward to our trip. I'll grab the wine you like. Can't wait to see you. My hand trembled as I read the email. The date matched the current weekend, her so-called seminar. My chest tightened as I opened more messages. Subject: Itinerary. From claire.wilson@marketingfirm.com. To adam.reeves@schooldistrict.com. Booked the suite at the Palmer Hotel. See you there. Red heart. The messages confirmed what the text from the unknown number had hinted at. Claire wasn't at a seminar. She was at the Palmer Hotel. With Adam Reeves. I closed the laptop, my stomach churning. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it serious? And, most importantly, how the hell had I missed the signs? Later that day, I decided I needed physical proof, something undeniable. If I confronted Claire now, she'd likely lie, spin some story, or try to gaslight me into thinking I was imagining things. No, I needed to see this for myself. I called a friend of mine, Carl, who ran a small security firm. He owed me a favor, and I figured it was time to cash it in. "Carl, I need your help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on, Matt?" "You sound tense," he replied. "I think Claire's cheating on me," I admitted, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I need to know for sure. Can you track someone for me?" Discreetly. There was a long pause on the other end. Finally, Carl sighed. "I don't like doing this kind of work for friends, Matt. It's messy. But, yeah, I'll help you. Send me what you've got." I forwarded the emails to him, along with the Palmer Hotel's address. Carl promised to send one of his guys to check it out. "It might take a day or two, but I'll get you what you need," he said. That evening, I tried to act normal around the kids, but it wasn't easy. My mind kept replaying the emails, imagining Claire and Adam together in some fancy hotel suite. I knew I couldn't jump to conclusions, there was always a chance this was all a misunderstanding, but deep down, I already knew the truth. Before bed, I texted Carl again. "Anything yet?" His reply came a few minutes later, "Not yet. Be patient." Patience wasn't my strong suit, but I had no choice. For now, I had to wait. But something told me I wouldn't have to wait long. The next morning, I woke up groggy from a restless night. Claire had texted me around 10 p.m., just a quick, long day, heading to bed. "Love you." A normal message, the kind any unsuspecting spouse might send. But to me, it felt hollow, almost mocking. I stared at the words on my phone for what felt like hours, wondering if she'd sent it before climbing into bed next to Adam. I couldn't dwell on it. Not when there was work to be done. By midday, Carl called. His voice was low and serious, a tone I'd only heard once before, when he told me about a close call during one of his overseas security gigs. "Matt," he said, "you're not going to like this." "What did you find?" I asked, my heart already sinking. "My guy tracked her to the Palmer Hotel last night. She checked in with Adam Reeves. They didn't even try to hide it, acted like any other couple. Shared luggage, lots of touching, you get the idea." The air seemed to leave the room. "Did they? I mean, do you have proof?" Carl sighed. "Look, man, I didn't send him into their room, but he got photos of them checking in, holding hands, and heading upstairs together. I'll email them to you. There's no question about what's going on here." My throat tightened. "Thanks, Carl. I appreciate it." After the call, I sat there in silence, staring at my laptop. When the email came through, I opened it immediately. The photos were grainy, taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking Claire's face. She looked radiant, like she was glowing. It was a look I hadn't seen in years, and it wasn't for me. Adam, standing next to her, was the picture of confidence. Tall, athletic, and younger than me by a good 5 years, he carried himself with the ease of someone who thought the world was his for the taking. My jaw clenched as I stared at his hand on her lower back in one of the photos. The intimacy of it was enough to make my blood boil. I saved the photos to a folder on my computer, labeling it simply proof. That evening, I decided it was time to push a little further. Claire's itinerary had mentioned she'd be flying back the next day. I knew I had to catch her off guard if I wanted answers. Confronting her at home would give her too much time to prepare a story, and frankly, I wanted her to see the full weight of her betrayal when she least expected it. So I made a plan. I would go to the Palmer Hotel myself. If she was still there with Adam, I'd catch them red-handed. The drive to Chicago felt interminable. Every mile gave me more time to stew, to imagine what I might walk in on. By the time I reached the city, the anger had crystallized into a cold determination. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about our kids, our life, everything we'd built together. If Claire was going to throw it all away, I needed to know why. I parked a few blocks away from the hotel and walked the rest of the way, my hands stuffed into my jacket pockets to keep from trembling. The lobby was bustling with activity, couples and conference attendees mingling in groups. I tried to blend in, heading straight for the front desk. "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm supposed to meet my wife here. Claire Wilson. Could you tell me what room she's in?" The receptionist, a young woman with a polite but guarded smile, typed something into her computer. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't release guest information." "Of course, I understand," I said quickly. "I just wanted to surprise her. She's attending the Chicago Educators Summit." The receptionist glanced at her screen again. "Oh, I'm sorry. That event isn't being hosted here this weekend." The knot in my stomach tightened. So Claire had lied about the seminar entirely. I stepped away from the desk, trying to decide my next move. That's when I saw them. Claire and Adam were stepping off the elevator, laughing at something he'd said. She was holding a small bag, probably from one of the boutiques in the lobby, and wearing the same dress I'd seen her pack. My breath caught as I watched them, standing there like the perfect couple, completely oblivious to my presence. I ducked behind a pillar, my pulse racing. This was it. Proof beyond a doubt. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. I stayed hidden behind the pillar, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. Claire and Adam were standing just a few feet away, completely at ease in their bubble of deceit. She reached up and adjusted his collar, laughing softly at something he said. The way she looked at him, it wasn't just casual or flirty. It was intimate, the kind of gaze I thought was reserved for me. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to confront them right there in the middle of the lobby. But I wasn't ready for that yet. Not here, with so many strangers watching. No, I needed to catch them when they were alone, with no way to wiggle out of the truth. They walked toward the hotel bar, and I followed at a distance. Claire ordered a drink, something fruity with an umbrella, while Adam went for whiskey on the rocks. They sat close, their knees brushing as they talked. From where I stood, it was impossible to hear their conversation, but their body language spoke volumes. She leaned into him, laughing, her hand resting lightly on his arm. I snapped a photo with my phone, the sharp click of the camera making me flinch. A few people turned to look, but Claire and Adam didn't seem to notice. I took a deep breath, trying to decide my next move. They didn't stay at the bar long. After finishing their drinks, they headed toward the elevators again. This was my chance. I hurried to catch the elevator next to theirs, jamming my finger on the button for the same floor. As the doors closed, my reflection stared back at me, pale and tense. My mind raced with what I was about to do. When the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, I stepped into the hallway, scanning for them. I caught a glimpse of Claire disappearing into a room at the far end, Adam following close behind. The door closed with a soft click. I stood frozen for a moment, my feet rooted to the carpeted floor. This was it. No more speculation, no more guessing. They were in that room together, and I was here to confront them. I approached the door, my stomach churning with a mix of rage and dread. Raising my hand, I hesitated for a split second before knocking, firmly, decisively. The muffled sound of voices stopped abruptly. I heard movement, and a moment later, the door cracked open. Adam's face appeared, his expression shifting from casual curiosity to wide-eyed panic when he saw me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice faltering. I didn't answer. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Claire was standing near the bed, her face draining of color as soon as she saw me. She was wearing the dress I'd admired when she packed, and it felt like a cruel joke now. "Matt, what are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice shaky. I looked between the two of them, my anger bubbling to the surface. "What am I doing here?" "What are you doing here, Claire? Last I checked, you were supposed to be at a seminar." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Adam, ever the picture of confidence, took a step forward, trying to assert himself. "Look, man, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I cut him off with a sharp glare. "Oh, there's no misunderstanding. I've got the emails, the photos, the texts. I know exactly what's going on." Claire's face crumpled, and she sank onto the edge of the bed. "Matt, please, let me explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain how you've been lying to my face for who knows how long. Explain how you're here with him while our kids think their mom is off working. Go ahead, Claire. I'm all ears." She buried her face in her hands, silent. Adam, meanwhile, stood frozen, clearly unsure whether to stay or bolt. "I think you should leave," I said, directing my words at him. My voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that left no room for argument. Adam hesitated, glancing at Claire, who didn't meet his eyes. Finally, he grabbed his jacket and muttered, I'll go." He slipped out of the room, leaving the door ajar behind him. Once he was gone, I turned back to Claire. The silence between us was heavy, suffocating. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes red and glossy. "I'm sorry, Matt," she whispered. "I never meant for you to find out like this." I stared at her, incredulous. "That's what you're sorry for? Not for cheating, not for lying, but for getting caught?" It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she said weakly. "No, Claire," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "It wasn't supposed to happen at all." Claire's words hung in the air like smoke, choking the life out of the room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting nervously in her lap, while I stood frozen near the door, torn between fury and heartbreak. How had we gotten here? How had she gotten here? "Start talking, Claire," I said, my voice low and tight. "I want the truth. All of it." She looked up at me, her green eyes glistening with tears. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth, lay it all out and beg for forgiveness. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't mean for this to happen." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You didn't mean for it to happen? Claire, you planned this. The emails, the lies, the hotel room, none of this was an accident." Her face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands. "I was lonely, Matt. I felt invisible." "Invisible?" I snapped. "Are you kidding me? I've been here every day for you, for our family. What more could you possibly want?" "It's not about you," she shouted suddenly, her voice cracking. "It's about me. How I feel. And for the past few years, I've felt like I'm just going through the motions. Like I'm dying inside." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to shout back, to tell her how unfair this was, how selfish she was being. But a small, treacherous part of me wondered if she was right. Had I taken her for granted? Had I been so focused on work and the kids that I'd missed the warning signs? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "How long, Claire? How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, and for a second, I thought she might lie. But then she said, "A few months. It started after that office party in the spring. Adam was kind to me. He made me feel special. Special? I repeated, my voice laced with venom. So what, you just threw away everything we built because some guy gave you attention? It wasn't like that, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You keep saying that, but you chose this, Claire. Every step of the way, you made a choice. She didn't respond, her silence speaking volumes. I paced the room, trying to process everything. The anger, the betrayal, the sadness, it was all too much. Finally, I stopped and turned to her. Do the kids know? She shook her head quickly. No, of course not. They don't know anything. For now, I muttered. But you've put us in a position where that might not stay true. You think they won't notice something's wrong? That they won't ask why mom and dad aren't okay anymore? Her face crumpled again, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said coldly. You don't get to act like the victim here. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The room was so quiet I could hear the muffled sounds of the city outside, cars honking and people laughing. It felt surreal, like the rest of the world was moving on while mine was falling apart. Finally, I broke the silence. This isn't something we can fix in one conversation. I need time to think. To figure out what the hell I'm going to do. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I stared at her, my chest tightening with a mix of rage and sorrow. You should have thought about that before you decided Adam was worth more than your family. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her guilt. The elevator ride down was excruciating. My reflection in the mirrored walls showed a man I barely recognized, hollow-eyed, tense, and on the verge of breaking. By the time I reached the lobby, I'd made up my mind about one thing: I wasn't going to let Claire's betrayal define me. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I needed space to think. Back in my car, I sat for a while, staring at the glowing lights of the city. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, and when I glanced at it, I saw Claire's name. I didn't pick up. Instead, I started the engine and drove aimlessly through the streets, searching for clarity in the chaos. Driving through the streets of Chicago, I felt numb. The city lights blurred together, and the honking cars and distant chatter of pedestrians faded into a low hum. My mind replayed the scene in the hotel room on an endless loop. Claire's pale face, Adam's guilty stammer, it was all burned into my memory. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers that would somehow make this betrayal make sense. But deep down, I knew there was no answer that could. Claire had made her choices, and now I had to make mine. By the time I returned home, it was well past midnight. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I dropped my keys on the counter and collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. My phone buzzed again, another message from Claire. I ignored it. I wasn't ready to talk to her, not yet. I needed to think, to sort through the wreckage of what was left of our life together. I opened my laptop, hesitating for a moment before logging into our shared bank account. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I felt compelled to check. Sure enough, there it was, a charge from the Palmer Hotel for a suite. The date confirmed it had been booked weeks ago. She'd planned this. That realization hit harder than I expected, like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment mistake. It was calculated. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Claire. Reluctantly, I answered, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear what she had to say. Matt, she said, her voice soft and full of desperation. I know you're angry. That's an understatement, I interrupted coldly. I know, she said quickly. But I need you to understand. I never stopped loving you. This wasn't about you. Stop, I said sharply. Don't you dare try to spin this. You don't get to tell me this wasn't about me. You lied to me, to our kids. You threw away everything we built for, what? A fling? Validation? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she whispered, I didn't plan for it to happen like this. You keep saying that, Claire, I snapped. But you did plan it. I saw the hotel booking. You knew exactly what you were doing. I hung up before she could respond. I couldn't listen to her excuses anymore. Instead, I turned my attention to what mattered most, our kids. They were at school now, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. But I knew I couldn't keep it from them forever. Sooner or later, they'd realize something was wrong. I needed advice, someone to guide me through this mess. I called Carl again, asking if he knew a good divorce lawyer. He hesitated, then gave me a name. She's the best, he said. But Matt. Are you sure that's where you're headed? I paused. Was I? Could this marriage be salvaged, or was it too far gone? The thought of tearing our family apart made my chest ache, but the idea of staying with Claire, of pretending everything was okay, felt impossible. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I need to be prepared. That afternoon, I met with the lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Elaine who wasted no time getting down to business. You've already gathered evidence, she asked, flipping through the photos I'd printed out. Yes, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. She nodded approvingly. Good. This will help if things get contentious. Do you share any major assets? Just the house, I replied. And a few joint accounts. And the kids, she asked, looking up at me. Do you want full custody? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I just want what's best for them, I said honestly. Elaine leaned back in her chair, studying me. That's good. Stay focused on them. Everything else can be rebuilt, but their well-being has to come first. Leaving her office, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I had a plan now, a path forward, but it didn't make the reality of my situation any easier. Claire had shattered my trust, and no matter what happened next, things would never be the same. That evening, as I sat alone in the living room, Claire called again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. I needed time to think, to decide if there was anything left worth salvaging. For now, all I could do was wait. Wait for the next move, the next confrontation, the next step in unraveling the life I thought I knew. The weekend loomed heavy, and for the first time in years, I dreaded being home. The kids were excited about their usual Saturday plans, soccer practice for Emma and a playdate for Ryan, but I couldn't focus on anything beyond the weight of what I discovered. Claire was supposed to come home that evening. She'd texted, saying she needed to talk, but I hadn't replied. I wasn't ready to face her yet, especially not with the kids around. They were my priority now, and I didn't want them caught in the crossfire. That morning, while Emma was at practice and Ryan was at his friend's house, I took a walk around the neighborhood. The fresh air helped clear my head, though the weight in my chest remained. My neighbors waved as I passed, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in our home. How many of them had seen this coming? Had Claire confided in anyone? The thought gnawed at me. Betrayal this big rarely stayed contained to just two people. When I returned, I found a package sitting on our doorstep. It was from a boutique in Chicago, addressed to Claire. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up and brought it inside. Opening it felt wrong, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a small, velvet jewelry box. My stomach twisted as I flipped it open, revealing a delicate silver bracelet, engraved with a simple message, "Forever, A." I slammed the box shut, fury bubbling to the surface. It was one thing to know about the affair, but seeing the tangible evidence of their relationship, the gifts, the effort he'd put into wooing her, was too much. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I forced myself to wait. Tonight, I would finally get the truth. When Claire's car pulled into the driveway that evening, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. She stepped out, looking tired but composed, and carried her suitcase to the door. "Hey," she said softly as she walked in, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding mine. "Hey," I replied, my tone colder than I intended. The kids ran to greet her, their laughter briefly cutting through the tension. Claire knelt to hug them, her smile strained but still convincing. She was good at this, pretending everything was fine. After the kids were in bed, I sat in the living room, waiting. Claire joined me, her face pale and drawn. "Matt," she began, sitting down across from me. "We need to talk." "No kidding," I said, leaning forward. "Start with this." I tossed the jewelry box onto the coffee table. Her eyes widened, and she hesitated before picking it up. "Where did you find this?" "It was on the doorstep," I said. "But that's not the point." "Explain it." She looked down at the box, her fingers tracing the edges. "It's from Adam," she admitted. "I didn't ask for it." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't try to play innocent. You've been lying to me for months, Claire. Do you even realize what you've done? To me, to the kids." Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, she seemed truly defeated. "I know I've hurt you," she said quietly. "I know I've made a terrible mistake. But Matt, it wasn't just about the affair." I stared at her, incredulous. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means I've been unhappy for a long time," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "And I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," I said bitterly. "You found a way to do it anyway." The conversation went on for hours, circling the same painful truths. Claire insisted she hadn't planned to leave me, that she wanted to fix things. But her words felt hollow, like an apology rehearsed too many times. "I need time," I finally said, standing up. "Time to figure out if this is something I can forgive. If we can even move forward." "What about the kids?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They deserve to know the truth," I said. "But not yet. For now, we'll keep this between us." Claire nodded, her face streaked with tears. "I'll do whatever it takes, Matt. I swear." That night, I slept in the guest room. The house felt cold and unfamiliar, a stark reminder of how much had changed. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, one thought echoed in my mind: could I ever truly forgive her? The days that followed were a strange limbo, a facade of normalcy over a fractured foundation. Claire and I barely spoke unless it was about the kids or logistics. At first, the silence was unbearable, but over time, it became a necessary shield, something to protect us both from the rawness of what had happened. The kids, oblivious to the tension, carried on as if nothing had changed. Emma was busy with soccer tryouts, and Ryan was excited about an upcoming class project. Watching them laugh and play was bittersweet. I wanted to shield them from the truth for as long as possible, but I knew the day would come when I couldn't anymore. Claire tried to bridge the gap between us, small gestures here and there. She'd make my favorite coffee in the morning or offer to help with tasks I usually handled. But I couldn't bring myself to reciprocate. Every time I looked at her, I saw the betrayal, the lies, the moments she had shared with Adam that should have been ours. One evening, as I sat grading papers at the dining table, she approached cautiously, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "Matt," she began softly, "can we talk? Really talk?" I set my pen down, sighing. "What's left to say, Claire? I already know what you did." "There's more," she said hesitantly, her voice trembling. "I think you deserve to know everything." Her confession unraveled slowly, piece by piece. She told me how it started, how Adam had been charming, attentive, and complimentary in ways I hadn't been. She spoke of feeling unappreciated, of losing herself in the monotony of daily life. It wasn't just physical, she said, tears streaming down her face. He made me feel alive again. Her words cut deep, but I held my composure. So you threw away our marriage for what? A fling? Validation? It wasn't supposed to be permanent, she said quickly. I never planned to leave you. I swear. Yet you booked hotel rooms. Accepted his gifts. Lied to my face, I said coldly. That sounds pretty permanent to me. But then, she dropped a bombshell I hadn't seen coming. It's over, she said quietly. I ended it with Adam before you confronted me. What? I asked, stunned. I ended it 2 weeks ago, she continued. I realized it was a mistake, that I wanted to fix things with you. But I didn't know how to tell you, and then you found out. 2 weeks ago. I repeated, my voice rising. So what was the hotel trip? A farewell party? No, she said, shaking her head. He booked it, thinking we'd pick up where we left off. I went to tell him it was done, that I couldn't keep lying to you. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the timeline didn't sit right. Why accept the bracelet? Why check in at all? You expect me to believe that? I said, my voice icy. You're trying to rewrite history to make yourself look better. Her tears flowed freely now, but I couldn't bring myself to care. It's the truth, Matt. I know I've hurt you, and I know it's going to take time, but I want to make things right. For us, for the kids. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkened street. Her words swirled in my mind, but they couldn't erase the images burned into my memory, of her and Adam laughing, touching, sharing something that had once been ours. I need proof, I said finally, turning to face her. If you're serious about fixing this, you'll prove it to me. Tell me everything, no more lies. Give me access to your phone, your email, everything. She nodded quickly, desperation in her eyes. Anything, Matt. I'll do anything. Over the next few days, she handed over her phone, her passwords, and even her work emails. I combed through them, looking for inconsistencies, for anything that would contradict her story. For the most part, she seemed to be telling the truth. The messages with Adam had stopped, and there were no new ones. But there were gaps, moments where her responses seemed rehearsed, calculated. The nagging doubt remained. Could I really trust her again? Or was this just another layer of deception? That weekend, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, the kids asleep upstairs, Claire turned to me. I know I've broken your trust, she said softly. But I love you, Matt. I never stopped. I didn't respond. The words felt empty now, like a song you've heard too many times to feel its meaning. I got up and went to bed, leaving her alone in the quiet. The final confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a Sunday morning, the kind that starts quietly, coffee brewing in the kitchen, the kids still groggy in their pajamas. Claire had been trying harder lately, her efforts transparent but earnest. She made pancakes, laughing with the kids as if everything was fine, as if the cracks in our marriage weren't visible to anyone paying attention. But I couldn't play along anymore. The weight of it all had become unbearable. I had to make a decision, for me, for the kids, for the life we'd built. After breakfast, I asked Claire to join me in the living room. The kids were upstairs, distracted with cartoons and games, giving us the privacy we needed. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while I stood near the window, staring out at the empty street. I've been thinking, I began, my voice steady but distant. About everything. Claire's eyes darted to mine, a mix of hope and dread written across her face. And I can't do this anymore, I said, turning to face her. I've tried to understand, to give you the benefit of the doubt, but every time I look at you, all I see is what you did. The lies, the betrayal, it's too much. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Matt, please, I know I messed up, but I love you. I want to fix this." "I know you do," I said softly. "But I don't think I can. Trust isn't something you can patch up with apologies and promises. It's the foundation of everything, and ours is gone." For a moment, I thought she might argue, might plead and beg until I gave in. But instead, she nodded, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "If that's how you feel, I understand. I think it's best if we separate," I said, my voice heavy with finality. "At least for now. We'll figure out how to tell the kids together, make it as painless as possible for them. They deserve that much." Claire wiped her tears, her gaze fixed on the floor. "You're right," she said quietly. "They don't deserve any of this." The conversation with the kids was harder than I imagined. Emma cried, clinging to Claire while Ryan sat silently, his wide eyes filled with confusion. I did my best to reassure them, to promise that we'd still be a family, even if things were different. But the words felt hollow, and I could see the hurt in their faces. Afterward, Claire packed a small bag and left for her sister's house, giving us some space. Watching her drive away, I felt an ache I hadn't expected, a strange mix of sadness and relief. The house felt emptier without her, but in some ways, it was easier. The tension was gone, replaced by a quiet stillness that gave me room to breathe. Over the next few weeks, I focused on the kids, on keeping their lives as normal as possible. Soccer games, school projects, bedtime stories, they became my anchor, the things that kept me moving forward. Claire and I kept things civil, working out a schedule for the kids and splitting responsibilities. She continued to insist she wanted to make things right, but I stayed firm in my decision. The damage had been done, and no amount of effort could erase it. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, sorting through old photo albums, I came across a picture from our wedding day. Claire and I were smiling, carefree and full of hope for the future. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how we had gone from that moment to this. Eventually, I closed the album and set it aside. The past was gone, and there was no point in dwelling on what could have been. What mattered now was the future, mine, the kids, and even Claire's, in whatever separate path she chose to take. In the months that followed, life slowly began to take shape again. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the grief of what I'd lost felt overwhelming. But I found strength in my kids, in my work, and in the small victories that came with rebuilding my life. As for Claire, we remained co-parents, navigating the awkward but necessary dance of raising children together while living apart. She seemed genuinely remorseful, and while I couldn't forgive her completely, I learned to let go of the anger, if only for the sake of the kids. Looking back, I realized that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It changes you, yes, but it also forces you to grow, to reassess what truly matters. And in the end, I chose to focus on what I could control, my future, my happiness, and the unshakable bond one shared with my children. Because life, no matter how messy, always moves forward.